if you could somehow take a bolt of electricity and morph it into a cartoon character, that would be Warrior. So you could load the spaceship with the rocket fuel and Warriors! Queering doesn't make the world work. No, I'm not going to forget that. I'm John Rickman with my review of Dark Side of the Ring, Becoming Warrior. I do want to say that I did see the Ultimate Warrior A&E biography, and I may review that as well. But I have time to review this right now, and man, I have made my opinions well known that after 1991, I did not care for Ultimate Warrior. He never wanted to get better, and holy shit, JR may have stolen the goddamn show here, as well as Jim's late wife, Sherry. And I mean Jim Hellwig, because calling him Warrior is really fucking silly, but it's also kind of funny to call him Warrior because it's just so goddamn stupid that he would think legally changing his name to Warrior would work. Like he thought queering wouldn't make the world work. Ultimate Warrior is a goddamn idiot that never wanted to get any better in wrestling. But boy, for a time, he was really, really damn over with the fans. He was over with me. From the first time I saw him in late 87, all the way until SummerSlam 1991, he was one of the most over guys with me because I was a kid. I was born in 1981, so I was 6 years old and then up to 10 years old. He really was popular with me, and then the spell was broken by Mania VIII because he came back, and I'm like, oh, he came back, and oh, what else is on? Because I was more into guys like Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, even though Mr. Perfect had taken time off by that point after SummerSlam 91. And yeah, I want to know your guys' opinions in the comments. And do you want me to review the A&E Warrior biography? Because, boy, they tried to whitewash that. And Dana Warrior didn't want to be part of this because it was smut and everything. And Dana, you didn't want people to see that you influenced him as a conservative and you just brought this side out of him. And Dana Warrior's just as bad as Ultimate Warrior, in my personal opinion. I hope his kids grow up to be a hell of a lot better than he ever was. So, Eric Bischoff, JR... Jim Cornette and his Warrior's first wife, Sherry, weighed in, and I really feel bad for Sherry, I really do. But we have some other quotes here. Very few people in the history of wrestling have gone from, gone to the pinnacle as fast as Warrior did. And then when Jim would get in the ring, he, honestly thought that he became the Warrior, and that was David Manning from World Class, and it's really sad, and nothing against David Manning. He tells great stories, and he lived through the world-class, triumph and tragedy and all that, just to use a cliche. It's just really sad that besides him and Kevin Von Erich, there really isn't anybody else that they can get from world-class because so many of them are gone, and it's just really, really sad. I'm really glad they were able to do a couple good biographies with various people from world-class WWE and then, the one done before. But for quite a while there, he was absolutely batshit insane, said Jim Cornette, and Cornette's never been shy about how he felt about Warrior. And then, he thought he was better than other people. He didn't want to learn the wrestling business because he didn't like it. JR did not hold back one goddamn bit. And I've knocked JR for some of his recent commentary in AEW, but JR is a professional wrestling fan, a lifelong fan. He's worked in wrestling since 1974, and, I believe as a referee, it might have even been 72, I think it was 74, but and as a referee, and then Mid-South UWF, and then WCW, and then WWE, now AEW. Let's just forget his commentary in New Japan, for New Japan USA. But, he was a moment in time. He was very colorful, a powerful character for a brief moment in time, said Eric Bischoff. And Chris Jericho does a narration here. And then Sherry, Tyree, Warrior's ex, she talks about how he had his insecurities, his self-doubt. They touched on some stuff that they did touch on in the A&E WWE biography. But they had only 1 hour to work with, and so it would have been now 44, 45 minutes, as opposed to 2 hours, so 80, 81 minutes like they did in the A&E part. And, it's not always fair to judge someone based on one or two things that you see. I will say that Sherry did give me a new perspective on Warrior. And given how she was not part of his life after a certain time, but especially after they got divorced in 1991, seeing how she seemed like a really genuine person. I really do hope that she actually is genuine in how she feels and stuff like that, and she seems like it. But, from these interview pieces, she comes across like a bit of a saint, like a woman that was there with Warrior when he had absolutely nothing. And he did, a whole lot of bullshit to her, and yeah, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So she did have fan pictures of, we snapped this picture of you guys at a show or whatever, and here it is. And that was cool to see that. So she did still appreciate the time she had with Warrior. while recognizing that Hellwig himself was an absolute batshit insane person. Footage of his competition doing bodybuilding. I guess you just, they were going to have their first date, and he was bouncing, and he threw this guy out and then threw a trash bag on top of him, and he says, well, I guess you just saw me take the trash out. It's like, yeah, both times. So there was a history of heart disease among, I believe, his grandfather and his father, and maybe even other men in the family as well. So he's bodybuilding. He didn't feel like he had a whole lot of time. He wanted to achieve his success. And sure, when you have maybe that kind of thing hanging over your head, you want to achieve that success. Of course, you could actually be a nicer person, or at least a halfway adequate person, but Warrior couldn't be that way. His drive is to be rich and famous. He told me everything, or what everyone wants to hear, that he'd protect me for the rest of my life, and that got her emotional. And I don't blame her, because anybody, whether you're a man marrying a man, woman marrying a woman, woman marrying a man, whatever relationship you get in, you want to know that the person you are trusting, you want to feel that you can trust them, that you can be this, that you can, put your heart, your soul, your body, and everything into being with them. And yeah, that didn't ultimately work really that well with Warrior, but we'll find out. Meet Sting, they go to Memphis Wrestling, and then we hear a bit of a, brief snippet on Memphis Wrestling that, they were running with some freedom fighters. I was not a fan of the Ultimate Warrior, said Jim Cornette, which is not a shock. And, when they showed up at the Memphis TV studio, it was rotten, but you could tell they had physical charisma. And they did. I mean, seriously, Warrior was like 315, 320. He was bigger than he would ever be. Sting was bigger than he would ever be because they were both bodybuilders. Sting got better. Warrior didn't. You wanted to look at them, but you just didn't want to see what they could end up doing in the ring, which is true. And the Memphis stint ended. They went to Mid-South / UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation, not the later Herb Abrams, version. Let's hear it for the snooze. That's what I'll go with. And then that line, Herb Abrams was on so much goddamn cocaine at that point. That was a fun one to review. So that's where the future of pro wrestling was shaped without us knowing it. Basically, they didn't tell the story. Bill Watts basically told Warrior to get the hell out of business because he didn't belong. Find another line of work. And he also tried to do chiropractic stuff before he got into wrestling. But anyway, they were the Blade Runners of Mid-South. JR talks about being a broadcaster with the company at the time, and he'd been a referee, as I said. I've never met or seen a wrestler with less ability than Ultimate Warrior. It's like, he was very, narcissistic. Like, well, I look good. I got this great smile. I have wonderful teeth. What more could a fan want? I don't know. Maybe you could wrestle? Jeez, JR didn't hold back. I fucking love it. And Warrior wasn't. He didn't want to be handled the way he was, be brought up, be beaten and stuff like that and built up. Sting was more about having his hand held. They had a lot of audio from Jim Hellwig. I don't know from how long ago. I would imagine from either the 2014 WWE documentary they did or something just before that. Because it sounded recent as it could, because he died in 2014. And, Sherry talked about seeing Hellwig become more conceited in the ring and stuff like that. He wasn't very good. He was never good, but he did have that physical charisma. I mean, again, just like I talked about a few minutes ago, as a kid, you would want to see him do some, really, really cool stuff. You want to see him pound his chest and you want to see him do that. Somebody's going to gift that. I just have a feeling, even though I'm not popular. And then Jim goes to world class. He's the Dingo Warrior. Nobody knew what the hell the Dingo Warrior was. It was funny to hear Gary Hart. You're the king of the dingoes. What the fuck does that mean? Gary Hart. Rest in peace, Gary Hart. And then he got egotistical there as well. And it followed him for the rest of his career, said David Manning. Jim Cornette, I've got the best body. I should beat everybody. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time learning this crap because I don't care about it. I just want to be a TV star. The only place to do that is to go to WWE. So he does. And he signs a contract with WWE in September of 87, I believe, or something like that. And basically he wants his wife on the road a little bit with him, like a month, which is fair. And then, that's where the fan pictures and stuff like that came in. Early job matches were rough because people didn't know how to take to him because he couldn't work. So they were going to get popcorn because they were like, why do we care about this? It was kind of cool to see 1987 Barry Horowitz, who had just come off of a stint, I believe, in Championship Wrestling from Florida, just folded up previously, Ultimate Warrior name was born. They did a pre-tape. He was talking about loading the spaceship with the rocket fuel. Oh! I don't know what the hell he was on about. I never knew what he was on about as a kid, but he still did, some really, really cool stuff. We're like, wow, I don't know what he said, but I believe it. Not a goddamn clue. Also, copious amounts of cocaine is what inspired that. I'm not saying he's the only one, but my God, that stuff was not just from him, doing it. Was from cocaine. Because it's the 80s, do a lot of coke and vote for Ronald Reagan. And he had to basically shake the ropes, do all the stuff, pound his chest. He had to do that to hide the fact that he couldn't work. His promos made no sense. They were nonsensical at best. Basically, Cornette says the best way to, use a guy like that is how Vince used him. Smash him over, hide his weaknesses, showcase his strengths, and give him a big push. Because you couldn't get a lot out of that guy. I mean, he was in a way kind of like Sid, where Sid looked like $1 million, but you couldn't really do anything with Sid either. Because Sid was just this guy. Sid at least, could have some good matches with the right guys, Warrior rarely could. But the whole point is you steal pay-per-views, or you try to build people and you try to get a few shows out of them, but not showcase them every single week. Because then it becomes obvious that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Then, the merch flowed out. The Wrestling Buddy, I actually did have a few of those back, when I was, I believe I had a Savage one, I believe I had a Warrior one, I believe I had a Hogan one. I don't remember what other ones I had. It's been a number of years. That was a while ago. But, they had him and Sherry bought the first house and got a $100,000 addition added with a home gym and all that and everything. Home gym for Jim Hellwig. Jim Hellwig, somehow a less stupid name than Warrior. That's saying something. He's got a wig. Well, he's got a wig on in hell because he ain't in heaven. Anyway, Jake Roberts said that, he was impossible to talk to. Him, was a total jerk in the ring. That Bobby Heenan was not a fan. Bobby Heenan had a bad neck, and that Warrior ended up breaking his neck during, series of matches they had, Weasel Soup matches and stuff, and which is called back to the AWA stuff. And Warrior just didn't care, which that was something when I started to hear about that, and also him wishing, cancer would take Bobby Heenan and stuff like that, and all the crap he said. Maybe instead of him saying that about Hogan wasn't the worst stuff in the world, because Hogan's shown himself to be a piece of shit as well. But Warrior not being grateful for the people that made him, especially for a number of years, always stuck with me. And Bobby Heenan always seeming like, somebody that grew up as did grow up as a wrestling fan. One of my, favorites. And Warrior just being that careless with him. It's like it's one thing to be intense and everything, but to be careless with people, you need to trust your opponent. Nobody could trust Warrior to take care of them. Because he would just do his own shit and, and would just do that. That's all he would do. And face paint and tassels. My God, so many tassels and cocaine. So he couldn't wrestle or talk. He looked like $1 million. And Sherry talked about how wrestlers were right about him in some respects, but that he did have his insecurities and his stuff that he was dealing with. That, brief history about how his dad left him, that his dad ended up cheating on his wife at the time with a neighbor, and gee, that would be, prophetic, so to speak. Very severe anxiety disorder, which I can identify with having an anxiety disorder, but also I think that a lot of it was just him having these issues and not dealing with them properly when he could have invested properly in working, and maybe talking to some of the boys. I actually think enough of the wrestlers might have been willing to help him, or at least, I don't know, it just seemed like sometimes he would use sometimes it was almost used as an excuse. Not as much whitewashing as WWE, but if he had that, I can understand why he would be this intense, but not that much of a jerk. Severe anxiety does not mean you have to be a jerk to somebody. And then, talking about Mania VI, that, the match with Hogan was set. He was set to take Hogan's spot. That Sherry said she could literally feel the match in the Toronto Skydome. Big deal. This is a monumental clash. This is one of the lightning in the bottle moments in, the expansion in WWE before, like, the downturn in the early 90s, where this was a lightning in the bottle moment. You could never recapture this. WCW tried, and they failed. They skipped over the WCW stuff in this NEA&E biography. I wonder why. Vince thought, Vince thought the Warrior could take the spot, and Warrior, was the one guy to beat Hogan during that run without shenanigans. I mean, they did the whole thing with, how much did they pay for the plastic surgery to screw me over, Mean Gene? And, but that kind of stuff. But Warrior beat him clean. I mean, sure, at 3 1/4, he kicked out, but still. For Hogan to do what he did with Warrior was a miracle. He carried Warrior to to immortality at Mania 6, and to do it live was an even bigger miracle because JR didn't give a fuck at this point. Sherry talked about, how he kind of became a little bit isolated at the, and a couple months later, Jim Hellwig left and the Ultimate Warrior came home. She found out that he was sleeping, around and stuff like that. He had a day planner, and with various women in various towns. And I want to say right now, there's no excuse for that. Life on the road is obviously tough, and plenty of wrestlers have cheated on their wives. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it. If I'm going to knock Warrior for that, then I got to knock Bret Hart. I got to knock so many other, because Bret has admitted that he's done this stuff. So many wrestlers have done this over the years. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that it's got to be an even playing field. What he did to Sherry, though, was bad in this case. She was with him when he had nothing, helped him do all this stuff, and helped him, truly, genuinely loved him, and he basically shot her down. And I'm not saying other wrestlers' wives didn't. There are some that were gold diggers, and then there were some that actually legit loved, who they were with. But for Jim to do that, she served divorce papers for him. He lost the championship at the Royal Rumble 1991, and his friendship and relationship with Vince was starting to fracture. And I'm kind of skipping over the whole stuff about him, having a day planner with all these women and everything, because I feel bad for Sherry. I do. But she seems like she's a genuine person that's come out better on the other side. Jake was going to get a title run. He was going to work with Warrior. I guess Warrior was going to get the title back sometime after SummerSlam 91, maybe, because they had this house show run with Taker and Warrior, body bag matches and stuff like that, where Taker actually suffered his first loss. But that didn't matter because Hulkamania would soon be dead, Monsoon. And then Jake Snake Roberts was getting him ready, like doing a whole thing with a snake and stuff like that, but it was in front of plexiglass, and the snake was going to bite him, he was going to have this venom, and he was going to face, Jake Snake Roberts going to win the title back, and Jake was going to get a championship run. I don't know about the timeline, how true that actually was, but he was going to work with Warrior. That was going to be the plan. And then Warrior contacts Sherry and basically says he's going to hold Vince up for a whole bunch of money because he feels that he doesn't have a ton of time left or whatever, and he feels he should, after all the investment he's made, not understanding that people made him, that he should hold Vince up for money. I'm no defender of Vince, but that was a stupid thing to do. And then he basically he goes backstage after chasing two minorities with a chair, which I'm sure he absolutely loved, and says, "You're fired, get the fuck out of my building." Jake gets looked at by Vince, and Vince says, "You got to have the worst luck in the history of wrestling, or you got to be the unluckiest guy I've ever met." And then Cornette reads some of Vince's letter to Warrior and basically says, "You have become a legend in your own mind," which is not wrong. The relationship ends in 1992. They kind of skip over the Mania 8 return and the Papa Shango feud, which that's probably a good thing. SummerSlam 92, which wasn't that bad with Randy Savage. He gets fired before Survivor Series 92, legally changes his name to Warrior in 1993, and then the lunch in 1996, the infamous return in 1996, Destrucity. It's like, you're probably wondering out there in TV land, what the fuck is Destrucity? It was a total waste of a trip. JR, again, did not hold back. Return to Mania 12, where, he squashed Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, with Sable, who was the female Ultimate Warrior. Except Warrior at least had physical charisma, where Sable just looked like a Shar-Pei puppy with all the goddamn stuff she had done, if you took that away. And then, he wasn't as good as I remembered, and that ended pretty quickly. They kind of skipped over the whole thing where Warrior was no-showing stuff, because his dad had died, but he apparently had been no-showing events before that and was just upset about the whole comic book thing not taking off and all these investments he had made and stuff like that. And he talked to Sherry, the gym that he had built, because they were still friends. She had met somebody and was going to have a kid. He had met Dana. And then, they agreed to mutually part ways. But he did say, "I want to thank you for all the years you've given me, and I'm sorry I wasn't a more faithful husband." I want to believe he meant that. I hope that Sherry got something good out of that. As far as getting some peace. I don't know if I necessarily believe it about Warrior. I believe that some people can change how they are. It just seems a little too convenient, but maybe he did. Maybe he did. I have no goddamn idea. I'm actually trying to be a little bit nicer about Warrior here because I'm going to be less nice with the A&E review. And then He has his career as a motivational speaker, how Dana influenced him, because Dana Warrior is just as bad as Warrior. Querying doesn't make the world work. That line is going to forever echo because, oh yeah, Warrior can be, used as a message of pride. What kind of pride? White pride, clearly. And then Warrior trashes everybody, lawsuits with WWE. That's all glossed over. His Hall of Fame induction and his speech. Every man, one day, every man's heart beats his final beat. His lungs breathe their final breath. He does that. Jake Roberts did talk about it at the Hall of Fame. He was going to punch him with a roll of quarters, and Warrior said, "I'm sorry for what I did. You and your family did not deserve that. That's who I was then. That's not who I am now." And they do the whole rest in peace thing, all that. And okay, that's it. I really don't have a lot of nice things to say about Warrior, but I will say as far as a 45-minute documentary piece, I believe this is the best way they could do it. They showed his highs, and they were honest about what he did. So anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.